Well, we're coming up on Jackie Robinson Day, which is Friday, April 15th, the anniversary of Jackie Robinson's historic debut in the major leagues in 1947. And of course, Jackie Robinson memorialized in the rotunda here at Citi Field. And Ken Burns, who has already made the definitive documentary on baseball, has a new documentary specifically devoted to Jackie Robinson. Ken, great to see you today.
It's great to see you, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about what your goal was in making this documentary.
Well, you know, I think Jackie was in 8 of the 9 episodes, or innings as we call them, in the 1994 series. But it's a mythological portrait that we tend to tell, and he's sort of imprisoned by that mythology. And what we felt we had the opportunity to do was sort of liberate him from that mythology, tell the correct and accurate story with a lot of undertow, and get to the real person. And he's much more heroic than he would ever seem to be. It's a wonderful story. So on 2 nights, tomorrow and Tuesday, we tell the complete story of Jackie Robinson, not just birth to his arrival in '47, but what he did later in his baseball career. And the really unknown is what he did after baseball as a civil rights leader.
When you started this project and you started accumulating all the knowledge that you would put into this documentary, what was the one thing that you didn't know that surprised you or made you really pay attention to?
Well, this film was made, co-produced and co-directed by Sarah Burns and David McMahon, and I don't think there was a day when we didn't go, my goodness, we didn't know that. For example, the very famous moment in which Pee Wee Reese is supposed to have put his arm around Jackie at a visit to Crosley Field never happened. It was not in the papers, not in his autobiography, not in the African-American press, which would have run 20 stories. And Rachel, his widow, said, you know, when they were going to build a statue, I said, please use a different picture. So, you know, a lot of these mythologies grow up, and they're like barnacles encrusting the story. And I think it's time to tell a complete picture. And you realize he's the first real true progress in civil rights across the country after the Civil War. I mean, when he came up, Martin Luther King was a junior in college. Harry S. Truman hadn't integrated the military. There was no Brown versus Board of Education. Rosa Parks was a decade away from refusing to give up her seat. So he is, as Dr. King said, a sit-inner before sit-ins and a freedom rider before freedom rides. And this is a story that is a great baseball story. He's the most important person in the history of baseball. His number is retired in all 30 stadiums, and nobody can wear his number after Mariano retired. But then this Friday, everyone has to wear his number. And it's a story that transcends sports, too, because it is so marked with the civil rights progress.
Lecky yanks one, foul down the line.
Ken, was it something that you looked to do coming out of the baseball series, or was it something that was brought to your attention to do?
You know, Ron, to be honest, we hadn't really thought it. It wasn't on our radar, but Rachel, his widow, who's nearing 94 and is herself a formidable, remarkable human being who's carried on the torch of Jackie Robinson through his foundation and now a museum that's hoping to open soon in Lower Manhattan. She just kept pressing me and said, you know, he deserves standalone treatment. And I said, you know, you're right. And finally, Sarah Burns and David McMahon and I were finishing a film and realized there was some daylight, so we agreed to do it. And I'm so glad we did, because I think that in some ways we'd helped publish and print the legend before, and now it's very helpful to tell a story that will, I think, blow your mind. It'll blow anybody's mind who's interested in baseball, and anyone's mind who's interested in the United States and heroism.
What was Rachel's reaction?
Well, you know, she gave us 3 interviews. She's pushing 94, and I guess we interviewed her when she was 90 and 91, and she sat and looked at the first episode and was just thrilled because it was, you know, telling a less familiar story about familiar events. And the second half, she was just sort of stunned. And so she's been on the road with us helping to promote it. She's indefatigable. Just saw her the other night at an event at the New York Times celebrating the Jackie Robinson Foundation and showing clips from the film. And she was there, you know, just an amazing human being.
Do you think, I know Jackie died very younger than he should have, and if he had lived longer, with the full civil rights movement, he probably would have had a much greater impact.
Oh, I think so. And his impact is so great today because we interviewed the President and First Lady, and they realized that he opened a door that no African American had gone through before, and that they've gone through, and that they were very honoring of his memory. But, you know, I think about that all the time when I see Rachel, Keith, because, you know, what if he'd lived to be 94? And he'd be like Dr. King and Nelson Mandela and Abraham Lincoln and Gandhi all rolled into one.
Bronco throws out Pilecki for the second out.
I know one of the projects you were working before on was the Central Park 5.
Yes.
So all these things dealing with Jackie and after his career, race relations, very complicated. And was it a natural segue to go from Central Park 5 to do the Jackie?
Very much so, and thank you, because Sarah Burns and David McMahon, who are the co-directors and co-producers of this, and I you know, sort of feel that race is at the center. We don't like to talk about it in America, but it's the center of American history. We were founded under the idea that all men are created equal, but oops, the guy who wrote it owned a lot of human beings, and so Americans are struggling still to deal with that. And so I think it's good to tell complete stories. I don't go looking for it. It's just there in American history, and almost all the films, the nearly 30 films I've made over the last 40 years, nearly all of them have something to do with race at some level, at some point. And clearly, something like Jackie Robinson does, or the Central Park 5 does, but it's there everywhere. And I think Americans would tend to run away from it, and it's something we should run to too. You know, like a dying fly ball.
You know, I'm sure every project has its own rewards with all the things that you've done, going back to the Civil War and all the other great documentaries that you made. How does this rank in terms of your enjoyment and the way it's gone?
This is the most, and I wasn't going to say this, but this is the most satisfying project that I've worked on to date, because with Central Park 5, Sarah Burns is my oldest daughter, and David McMahon, who's sitting in the stands with my granddaughter, is my son-in-law. And so the idea that we could tell a very complex, multi-generational portrait of a family, the Robinsons, with our family, made it really, really satisfying.
Ken Burns, so good to talk to you, and we really look forward to seeing this documentary.
Yeah, tomorrow night and Tuesday night on PBS.
Great. Wonderful. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Gary.
Okay, great to see you again.
Ken Burns.
Thank you.